One of the trading tools I use a lot is XLQ, and so I thought I might give a few examples of some tips and tricks that you can use when working with XLQ to make things simpler and easier. XLQ offers a lot of advantages. It's an Excel plugin that I find incredibly useful. What it does is it extracts real-time and historical financial data, imports it into Excel, and updates it. You can use XLQ with other Excel formulas. It's flexible, it's extremely customizable. You can pretty much make workbooks and trading tools that will do just about anything with XLQ. A few things that I use it for are my quantitative stock reports, my quantitative market reports, my intraday dashboards, my end of day dashboard scanners, my back testers, and my trading calculators. It can save you a tremendous amount of time. Now, if you're completely new to Excel and or not that savvy with Excel formulas or not handy with a computer, then XLQ is going to take some time to master if you want to design a workbook. If you're not interested in making your own workbooks and you just want to use trading tools that have been designed with XLQ, they're pretty easy to use. A few things that'll make XLQ, workbooks, trade tools, and dashboards easier to use is if you have a gaming PC. That means you've got plenty of speed and plenty of memory. You want a good CPU and you want a good bit of RAM. Also, internet speed. Since it's actually retrieving data from a data provider, it has to go onto the internet to get that information. I recommend an Ethernet connection, not a Wi-Fi. It reduces latency. You can also check your internet speed to make sure that it's operating at the speed it should be. And with all computers, you want to make sure it's in good health. You want to use your antivirus diligently, use your registry cleaners and your defrag software on a regular basis. I prefer XLQ 2 over the old XLQ 1 Plus. I think it works so much better. It's faster. I really like it. When thinking about using XLQ, you want to consider your data provider. Some data providers limit how many symbols you can use, and then they'll charge you more for additional data. That's usually related to real-time streaming. End of the day data is free. You can use Yahoo, for example. If you want more in-depth end of day data at a good price, Norgate is a data provider. There's all kinds of data providers. Some are free, some you pay for. Yahoo's free. Your broker, such as TD Ameritrade and Interactive Brokers, they're both free and can be used with intraday data. IQFeed is pretty expensive, but they have very good data. A while back, Yahoo was having some issues with their data. I think since then they've resolved it. But you have to be aware that even data providers have technical glitches. Something else to consider is perhaps you want certain data that isn't universal on all data providers. For example, the volume-weighted average price. If you take the time to look at the demo that Leo has created for XLQ, you'll see he has annotations on what formulas correspond to what data providers. I will also warn you about conflicts. For example, if you want to open up a dashboard or a workbook that has XLQ and you're using your TD Ameritrade data feed for it. So if then you decide to open up NinjaTrader and use the same TD Ameritrade data feed, you're going to have a conflict. NinjaTrader will be disconnecting continuously and then you'll get locked out. But that's something to keep in mind. You can resolve that kind of conflict by having multiple broker accounts and assigning certain workbooks and certain charting software to different providers. Here's some basic information about the pop-up menu on your taskbar for XLQ. When you first get it, you need to register. You go to the About. You can go to your Preferences and set your preferences. Here's an example of the preference box: General Preferences, Historic, Intraday, and then specific data providers. So if you're going to use your broker like TD Ameritrade or Interactive Brokers, you can click on it. You can set your preferences. You need to put your password and your username in it. The one thing you want to make sure to set in your preferences, especially for intraday, is what interval you want to be operating on. I use a 3-minute chart, so I use a 3-minute interval to update most often. So you've got several bits of data in the preference section, most important being interval. You can also use XLQ with AAII's Stock Investor Pro. If you're new to XLQ, I would hold off on that until you get a little experience with it. There's also a help file in the pop-up menu, and you can go to Leo's website, www.qmatrix.com. He's got a lot of helpful resources there, and you can also go to my website. I have some workbooks there that you can sample for free, and they can help get you started. They're not locked. You can look at the formulas, see how I've structured them, and it can give you an idea of how you need to structure your workbook. When it comes to building your own workbook, there's a few tips to help make it easier. First, you want to keep your initial data set small. Only do about 5 rows of data to begin with. If you try to populate 600 rows or 1,000 rows of data, it's going to be very slow and take forever to move. So just do about 5 and make sure you're getting the kind of data and results you would expect. Keep your design clean and simple. The idea is you want to create a basic layout that you can use for all your workbooks, and then that way you can reuse and copy and paste formulas. Makes it really easy. You want to use minimal conditional formatting. That would be this, highlighting cells certain colors if. That seems to take up a lot of memory, conditional formatting, so I try to keep it to a minimum. You want to make sure that you've got the correct formulas for what you're using before you expand your workbook into something larger. Always double check your formulas. You might have a formula that is functioning, but it wasn't the exact formula you wanted. And when you change one part of your workbook, you'd be surprised at how much it can change all the other areas. You want to be sure, use formula locks for your rows or columns. That's typically the $sign that's placed either before the row or after the column. And when you design your workbook, think of making it so that changes will be easy. For example, instead of embedding your data provider in every formula, make a data provider section where all the data comes back to here to look for the data provider. That way, if you want to change your data provider, you can. You just type it right in there rather than having to type it in every single formula. Once you have a finished workbook, I find that it's a lot easier to see if you hide the toolbar, and I'll show you right here. Here's the toolbar. Just click the up arrow right there. And then under View, you hide the headings and you hide the formula. And look, you get a really nice clean look. You might need the headers if you have a lot of rows, but if you just have a dashboard, then you probably wouldn't. Sometimes you have to face the issue of XLQ or Excel freezing. There's things that you can do to prevent freezing. First, update your XLQ and make sure that you have the most recent version. I think XLQ 2 is the best. You want to close any unnecessary apps or folders. You want to reduce the number of open XLQ workbooks. If you're trying to open several large XLQ workbooks all at the same time, it's going to take forever to open them. It's going to take forever for all the data to load and to refresh and to retrieve all the financial information. So just open what you need to work with. I have a pretty fast computer, and I found 2 workbooks at a time that are large is about best. Also, when you open a large workbook or dashboard, it can take quite a while to load the data. So if the file's large and it doesn't seem to be loading instantly, don't mess with it. Just wait patiently for it to load. If you try to mess with it, it will cause it to freeze. And also in general, you want to use minimal formatting. When you're editing or populating your formulas on a larger scale, the first thing you want to do is always have a backup copy of all your files. Always save your XLQ work often, especially before you make any major change, like a format change or inserting a row or deleting a row. You can shift Excel formula calculations to manual. If you have a lot of data and you find that it's freezing a lot, you just come up here to Formulas, Calculating Options, and you go from automatic to manual. And that can help you as you're transferring large amounts of data or trying to expand and populate a large area. Another thing that you can do is you can go to XLQ and you can click Pause Data Retrieval. You see I have it paused, so you can pause it or you can resume it right here in the pop-up. Those are 2 very effective things, shifting the formula calculations to manual and pausing the XLQ data retrieval when you're trying to expand a large workbook. And if you do have a freeze and you can't seem to wait it out or just is stuck, one thing you can do is monitor RAM and CPU usage. Most computers will have some kind of a performance monitor that allows you to keep an eye on both of them. If your CPU is ramped up to 90 or 80, it means your computer is working pretty much at maximum capacity, and so you definitely don't want to be clicking the mouse and trying to do other things. You want to wait till it drops back down. So if you're experiencing freezing problems, it could be a function of your computer, that you don't have enough RAM, that you don't have enough CPU power for what you're trying to do. Another thing you can do if it's completely frozen and you want to get out of it is you just go to the Task Manager, which is down at the bottom of your toolbar. You would find Excel, you'd click it, and then you'd click End. Also, if you see your XLQ 1 engine and your XL2 bridge, you can also end those tasks. And I would recommend that you do that. Make sure that they've shut down before you try to reopen XLQ. If you're having a lot of trouble, you might need to reboot your computer, run a registry cleaner, or defrag your computer. Like with any technology, sometimes there are challenges, and you might find that you're having no data populate a cell or a section, or that you're getting errors. If you're not getting your XLQ data, there is a chance that you do not have the XLQ add-in enabled in Excel, or that it's for some reason disabled it. What you do is you go to File, Options, Add-ins, and you look to see if XLQ is in the active add-in. If you're not sure, just go down to the Excel Add-ins tab and click Disabled Items and Go, and it'll show you if there's any disabled items in here. So if you see XLQ in here, click on it and then click Enable. If you're not getting any data, you might need to go back to the Formula button and make sure that calculations have been switched back to automatic. You can also refresh the data in Excel or with the pop-up menu. Here's a tab for XLQ. In Excel, you click Refresh All. That's one way to do it. Another way you do it is you go back here and click Refresh. A pop-up will happen. It'll show you the individual data providers, or I like to just click Refresh All. I find it easiest. And remember, it does take time for XLQ to load, so give it a little time. You might not be getting data because you're using a ticker that has been discontinued. Maybe it was bought out by another company, maybe the business went out. XLQ pretty much only retrieves data for tickers that are in existence at the time that you're seeking the financial data. Another thing is to look at the intervals. Lower the number if necessary, especially intraday. So for example, if you have an intraday dashboard up and you are looking at overbought, oversold with a 10-minute interval and your preference is set for 3 minutes, that means it would take 30 minutes before that particular cell would give you any data back. And if you open a workbook and then close it and then reopen it, it's going to take time to reload. You might think, whoa, it's already got the data. That's not true, especially for intraday workbooks. It might be true for end-of-day workbooks where you'd still have the same data and you'd be okay, but not for intraday. You might also not be getting data because that cell is looking for information for a future date or time that hasn't yet occurred. You may not be using a formula that that particular data provider has information for. For example, the volume weighted average price or IQFeed might have that, but TD Ameritrade might not. And then it's also possible you have an error with one of your formulas. So when you're trying to troubleshoot, one thing you want to do is make sure that you have the most recent updated version of XLQ. If you have a value error, sometimes it's because you have an incorrect or discontinued ticker. If you have the DIVO error, a lot of times that's because a calculation isn't happening because some other XLQ data that it is dependent on is still loading. You might see range errors. A lot of times I've found that when you see a range error, it just means the data is still loading. If you get a name error, it indicates that you have used an incorrect formula. You've got some kind of error in your formula. If you see the NUM error, I see that a lot on my intraday dashboard, and that's just because the data is still loading or I've forgotten to connect the correct data provider. So if you want to learn more, you can go to my website and look at the free workbooks, and you can also go to the creator of XLQ's website and look at his support pages. He's got a lot of good information there. XLQ is one of my favorite trading tools. I use it every day. It saves me a great amount of time, but it did take time and effort to learn. So you need to decide, are you the kind of person that wants to spend that time to create and develop your own workbooks, your own dashboards, your own trading tools with XLQ, or are you the kind of person that would just prefer to buy one? I hope you found some of these XLQ tips helpful. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Good fills, everyone.